This video is brought to you by the letter P, as in pacing, punctuation, paragraphs, point of view, and repetition, like all the repeating P's. If your writing is a cake, your plot, settings, and characters are the batter, or the theme and emotions if you're writing a poem. Your fancy details, your imagery and creative language are the decoration. That should be it, right? But there's one important step that's often overlooked: the shape of your cake. So today we're going to talk about the structure of writing, how to spot it in other people's work, and why it's important. How you choose to convey your information is a lot like using a camera to shoot a film. It allows you to lead the audience's attention to what's important, or away from what's important. The form of the story lets you choose what you want to focus on and how to frame what's happening. This video also brought to you by the letter F. Let's start with pacing. I don't mean how fast or slow the action of the story is, though that comes into play too. I'm talking about how fast or slow you let us into what's going on. Haven't you ever seen a movie where the fast-paced action suddenly slows down so you can really absorb all the details of a moment, and then suddenly speeds up again? Obviously, nothing actually slowed down, but it's drawing you right into the moment, into the feeling, and you can do the same thing with your writing. You can do this using line length, punctuation, and spacing out information. Sidebar: did you know that ancient Greek and Egyptian hieroglyphics didn't have punctuation or spaces between letters or words? I know, it's crazy. Imagine having to read a whole paragraph like this. I mean, where would you stop? You know punctuation already. Think of them like the eyebrows of a word, which can change a what to what, 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 and so on. But they're for more than just adding tone. Spaces break up a stream of letters into words. Commas and full stops break up the sentences or phrases and tell your brain where to pause and take a breath. So you can use those to cue your reader's brain into slowing down or speeding up with you, using punctuation and paragraphs. See what I did there? Even with just these three words, adding line breaks in different places makes you read them differently. Punctuation and paragraphs. Punctuation and paragraphs. Punctuation and paragraphs. Adding punctuation can amplify that because it gives more instructions for your brain to pause, whether for a short while or for a long, dramatic pause. You can say he picked up his sword and swung, or he picked up his sword and swung. He picked up his sword and swung. Add in a line break for more flavor. He picked up his sword and swung. Look at how that action seems to slow down from one quick fluid movement to something with a little more weight and suspense to it. You can add more detail to make the moment slow down, like focusing on the weight of the sword or its sound as it swings through the air, the panicky train of thought going through the character's mind before the sword's arc ends. Or separate the observation into short, sharp sentences to mimic a controlled character taking stock of all his options before his attack even ends. And if you want things to speed up, you don't use any punctuation at all, and instead you just add "and" in because your character is in a panic and someone has just asked them what's going on here, and all the words or thoughts just come out in a rush, and the character isn't even stopping to take a breath, and so your reader just gets yanked along and whew, panic over. Let's look at point of view. Let's say you have three characters of equal importance. Anytime you're focusing on one, something terribly exciting might be happening with the others, and we might never know. So you have to decide who the camera is pointing at and when. But let's say you've made that decision, and this chapter is going to be all about character one. Or you make things easier for yourself and just have one important character. How clever of you! You solved all point of view problems. Except you haven't. Let me hit you with third person, second person, and first person narration. Sound familiar? Third person is what we've been using for all of our examples so far. It's the most common way to tell stories. She walked into the room and so on. Second person is the rarest of them. You don't really find a lot of stories that start with "you wake up in a dark prison cell" unless it's a game. The narration of those stories tries to make you, the reader, the main character. And that can get very tricky in a story you've planned out because you can't really make decisions for the reader and let them feel like they're part of the story. First and third person let the reader piggyback on the shoulder of an existing character and share in their adventure with them. So you pick third person because that's the common one. You've solved all point of view problems. Except you haven't. What kind of narrator do you have? Just a standard one with no frills? Or is the narrator someone who knows or knew the characters? Is the narrator sarcastic, funny, sorrowful? Does the narrator have an agenda or biases of his own? And are you going for third person, objective, limited, or omniscient? Let's pull that back for a moment and look at those one by one. Third person objective. The narrator is telling you the story, but has no idea what anyone is thinking or feeling on the inside. It's the equivalent of me telling you about that man across the street with the hunched shoulders and the tragic face. He was probably sad as far as I knew, or maybe he just looks like that. Third person omniscient is where the narrator knows everything. They can spin the camera around to look at anything they want, including the inner thoughts and feelings of characters. Third person limited. The narrator still knows everything, but keeps the camera on one character's shoulder, sometimes pointing into their heads. That camera can be moved from person to person, but it needs to be mounted to what it's moved to and doesn't just swing about wherever. You'll notice each of these brings you one step closer to a character, sort of zooming in and making them more of the focus. Let's take an example. The rain came down hard on the two people standing in line outside the store. Sarah was relieved that her parents had packed her an umbrella, but Abdullah was starting to have some regrets. I hate getting caught in the rain, thought Abdullah, looking at the little girl with the umbrella as a drop of water started to work its way down into his collar. That's a lot of options, so much complication. So you pick first person because the narrator and the main character are the same person, and it's I all the way. You've solved all point of view problems. Except you haven't! First person means you're stuck inside your character's head. That means your character can't really be a general narrator the way a third person one can be. You have to decide on your character's voice, how they talk, how they see the world, and more importantly than that, does your character have biases? An agenda? Are they an unreliable narrator? Can your reader really trust them to tell them the truth of what's happening? Well, that's up to you to decide. They only have one narrator to rely on now. You may have noticed a little repetition happening in this video with the except you haven't. Repetition is useful not just for poetry, because it creates a pattern or a rhythm even within prose. You don't necessarily have to be just repeating words, though a stream of no, 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 no does a lot to tell us about a character's panicked point of view. You can repeat symbols, or someone's reaction to a certain thing, or you can repeat the same sequence of events happening to different people, or you can repeat the structure of how someone speaks. There's a lot you can do with that, and it plays with the pacing and the perspective in very interesting ways. Before you go mad with power, let's do a couple of exercises to let you play around with what you've learned. Exercise 1. Write about 5 lines of something happening. Anything you like, have fun with it. Write those 5 lines in third person omniscient. Then write it again for each different perspective. It'll give you a good sense of what different advantages and challenges each of them has to offer. If you need a little refresher course on what those different perspectives are, I've written the definitions down in the description box. Exercise 2. Write one sentence. Play with the punctuation and line breaks and level of detail to create as many different pacings as you can. Lots of short, sharp motions, a couple of slow, certain ones, fast and fluid, or slow but still flowing. Let's see what you can do. I'd love to see what you guys come up with, so be sure to add something in the comments. Maybe some other suggestions for other videos I can make. Okay guys, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!